Welcome. Turning the tables using cyber deception to hunt phishers at scale. Who the hell am I? My name is Ross Bevington. I am a threat researcher at Microsoft. I'm a chartered engineer. I'm a reverse engineer. I've got a few CVEs. I've been round the houses and for a long time. You might have seen me talk at other kind of B-sides conferences. I worked for the UK government for a while. I was recruited into Microsoft to be responsible for Linux threat detections. I don't do that anymore. I am Microsoft's head of deception. I've called myself head of deceptions. No one said that's okay. No one's told me to stop. So I can keep using that. That's my title. I am Microsoft's head of deception. You might have read a blog post I wrote recently that garnered quite a lot of people looking at it about code.microsoft.com. So I wrote that as well. I'm not going to talk about that today. But I'm also known for hacking cameras. I've been on Sky talking about hacking e-cigarettes and turning those into bad USB devices. I thought I had 10 minutes more for this presentation than I thought I have, so I'm going to talk quite quickly. And also, first of all, say that this is not the first time I've been to the University of Exeter. I'm quite surprised to see this is me before I was jaded. You know, I look a little bit like a murderer. I am not. So what's this all about? This is what I'm going to be talking to you about today. I'm talking about what is deception. You may not have heard of it. You may not understand how you can put that into practice. What is phishing? You know, this is B-sides. I get to start really, really low. My son's here. He doesn't know what phishing is, so I'm going to have to tell him as well. Deception. How can you use deception in your organization? How can you create a deception operation to do something cool? How have we been doing that to do interesting things at Microsoft? And then some results and takeaways. I hope you like pie charts that I'll canter through. But before we begin, here's a bit of jargon. I'm sorry, our industry is rife with jargon, but, you know, this is it. You know, hopefully you know about multi-factor authentication. You've got that turned on. I might mention TTPs, you know, tactics, techniques and procedures. This is what threat actors use to actually exploit. You know, do they use PowerShell? Do they use Bash? That kind of stuff. Threat intelligence is another thing that I'll talk about. And this is the kind of IP addresses, the URLs, kind of the raw information that we try and do stuff with. We want to turn that threat intelligence into actionable threat intelligence. That is information about an attack that we actually can do something with, you know, give to the police, you know, send an indictment to the US government, that kind of stuff. And then I'll talk about a whole raft of kind of Microsoft technologies. So, you know, Office, you know, Azure, which is where you can buy compute in the cloud. I'll talk about a tenant, which is, you know, effectively a business that Microsoft kind of hosts that infrastructure for you. And I might kind of drop in AAD and Entra, which is how we do authorization. How do we know that your password is correct? That kind of stuff. I must first apologize for my old memes. If you are younger than me, you probably won't have watched the films I've seen, and I must apologize for those. I also have to apologize because I'm sorry. I've not been able to fix cybersecurity, and I've come here today to say, broadly speaking, these old greybeards like me, we haven't fixed it as well. And so I've come to B-sides to kind of throttle you into helping us, come to us with new ideas, tell us where we've been going wrong, because as you see from this graph, you know, 36% of businesses have identified a cyber attack in the last 12 months. The cost of ransomware and other stuff is now at the GDP of countries like Latvia and Estonia, and this year is probably going to be Slovakia. You know, we've got a really big problem, and it's you people in the audience that I need you to help fix it, because I haven't done a great job. If you're here, you might be thinking, well, actually, there's more money being a bad guy. And so I'm also here saying, please don't be a bad guy or girl. You know, when I started, you know, down this route of cybersecurity, there wasn't really many different paths. And I would just say, if you're thinking about doing these things, or if you've done these things in the past, you're more likely to get caught now than perhaps ever before. So anyway, we need new blood. And we need to start thinking about different things. And one of those things I want people to start thinking about is deception technology. Now, deception, as it says up here, is a form of active defense. And rather than kind of attacking the computers and the automations. We're interested in deceiving the actual attackers, the humans behind the keyboard. And I'm going to talk throughout this presentation about actually having an impact on the real people that are behind this attack. So deception technologies, it's not just about honeypots, that's just one thing. It's also using kind of traps, lures, decoys, lots of other tricks, often based in psychology, in order to change the game of cyber, to make it more difficult for our adversaries to do stuff and make it easier for us to do stuff, to kind of shift the balance, turn the tables, if you will. It's a type of adversary engagement where we're not talking to a computer, we're not sending bits and bytes to a computer, we're really sending that information to who's behind that. But a deception isn't attacking back. It's not throwing exploits at them. It's not turning an existing attack around and firing it back at them. It's things like, tar pits. If somebody sends you some malicious data, you respond back really, really slowly and cost them more resources, cost them more CPU time on Amazon, that kind of thing. And crucially, what I want you to take away from this slide is attackers are already using deception. If you're engaging in any part of ransomware, they're already using that when they're trying to negotiate with you. So we need to use those same technologies as well. And here's some kind of quick examples of that. I don't know if you've kind of seen Jim Browning on YouTube. He baits scammers on the phone. This is a really great opportunity for us to do kind of stuff like that in the real world in our day jobs. And he gets these people on the phone and he spies on them and he tricks them and he wastes their time and he slows them down, he tar pits them, that kind of stuff. Troy Hunt, he's done some stuff in deception before. This is him kind of messing around with someone's fake washing machine, scam. But he's also got a really great thing, which is password purgatory. If you've heard of this, what it is, you put a password box on your website, someone wants to register that for whatever reason, you might drive them there, and every try of a new password, the password doesn't meet the complexity requirements. And so people have wasted their time, how hard it is to enter a password into a website that you want to visit. He's used that as a kind of defense mechanism. So all these things are kind of deception tech. And I want to get onto that later as I explain what we've been doing at Microsoft. So very quickly, what is phishing? So you've probably got your own ideas about what phishing is, but there's loads of different types of phishing attacks. This is, I would say, the traditional one. You get an email, although that could be a Teams message, it could be anything. You're kind of tricked to visit a website, or prompted to visit a website. You enter your credentials, now the attacker has those credentials. But there's lots of kind of different phishing attacks. So this is another one. Rather than entering your credentials, you're tricked to download a file, and then they get code execution, or your browser's exploited and you get code execution, or an attachment is opened and you get code execution. And, you can repeat this with phone calls and SMS and QR codes. What I want to tell you is there is a bit of a dirty secret in the industry. Is that this kind of stuff behind me, where you do an attack and get code execution, we've got really great optics on what's going on that attack. The malware sandboxes, and we can tell you what the malware does and what it goes to. When you've given your attacker some creds, the story that defenders have about what the attacker's doing with those creds, how long they've got them for, what they're going to do with them next, what they do in the first 5 minutes they've got those credentials, those username and passwords, we don't actually have a great story. A lot of businesses don't know, and they look at the logs and they tell them something, but the time between the loss of credentials and attack, ransomware, text file on the desktop, could be months. And so one of the things I wanted to do was kind of demystify this area of the attack chain. Anyway, let's look at some real examples here. So here are some real phishing sites, and as you'd expect, they look like login boxes, and they're for any and every business you can think of. But they also come in different formats. This is a Excel document you have to unlock and put some stuff in, and eventually ask for your creds. Attackers know psychology. Whereas defenders, I think we're not really grasping that as much. They're doing things like in the case of this one over here that, you've got to complete this to avoid email disconnection. Your password's going to expire in 24 hours. This idea of scarcity is very common in sales and psychology, and attackers know this and they're using it. They're using deception technology against their victims. So, a lot of people, and this is kind of IRS, American tax, there's lots of different reasons why you might run a phishing campaign, and it's not just to get credentials for, say, Microsoft infrastructure. So let's skip forward a bit. It's not just the scropes at the bottom of the pool that are doing this, it's also groups like Russia. So this is a phishing campaign from Midnight Blizzard, also known as Nobelium. And this targets kind of government, think tanks, military, telcos, that kind of stuff. This is something from Star Blizzard, also Russia, also known as Cyborgium. We've got Periwinkle Tempest. This is a financially motivated actor. They're also known as Devo 193 and Ryuk. And what's kind of behind this is everyone is doing phishing. It's not just the person in their bedroom, is all the way up to kind of state actors as well. And why does Microsoft track this? Why are we interested in this? Because, we are at the forefront of phishing. Microsoft is one of the most attacked brands. Attackers love to use our brand and to masquerade as that. And that's something we need to kind of defend against. This data is from kind of Proofpoint in 2022, and not really much has changed. Some stats to highlight here is that most kind of users, I wouldn't say most, but a large proportion of users don't really understand how email works, don't understand how easily things can be, pushed on them as a trick. And this is kind of onto us to fix this. I would have thought in kind of 2024, we wouldn't be talking about users not understanding that they can be easily tricked, but, here we are. This kind of behind me here, this graph is all the brands that are being abused. You can see how kind of big Microsoft is on that. Now, this is an old slide. I reran the results yesterday, and broadly speaking, it's the same kind of ordering. It changes on a week-by-week basis, but Microsoft isn't, number one again. And why is this? Because phishers are often really interested in Microsoft's credentials. Microsoft now is a cloud provider. If you are buying Office 365, if you're in Azure, you've homed your data from your on-premises network onto our network. And as a result, if you're an attacker, you want to get access to that. And so abusing our brand is a great way to do that. So what's Microsoft doing about it? I don't really want to continue without saying, we are doing lots of things in this space. We're blocking millions and millions of messages a week. But they just keep on coming and they keep on changing. We've done things like extended smart screens so that phishing is now enabled by default. So rather than just protecting you for downloading an exe that was bad, we're now saying you've visited a website that's bad as well. Our digital crimes unit is doing tons of work to actually take stuff down from the internet, which is incredibly hard because there are lots of businesses out there that don't pick up the phone when, we say we've seen abuse on your platform, that kind of stuff, and we want to take that down. We're closing tons of email accounts when we see them. If people like you are reporting it to stuff, it's not going into a black hole. We're actually doing something about it. We really want to kind of stop this problem. And if you're interested in helping us further, we've got a beautiful API that you can call from PowerShell. There's a website. So if you do see something that looks like phishing, bad email address, something like that, something you think Microsoft should be doing, you can use that and we can kind of spring into action. So now back onto phishing. I want to talk a little bit about a successful phishing attack. And there's broadly 4 parts to that. And then I'm going to talk about how we're going to disrupt this. So I don't like to talk about kind of kill chains. I'm not a military person. So I've kind of collapsed everything I know from MITRE's attack and kill chain into kind of 4 kind of easily digestible spaces. And there are so many actors in this space that most groups are picking the areas that they want to do themselves. So in reconnaissance, there might be a group that specializes in your data dumps. exploiting a business, getting their database of email, users, that kind of stuff, and putting it on the internet and selling it. That's kind of one thing. That's your reconnaissance. To build this attack, we're going to need to have a whole list of people to email. And so there are groups out there that you can go out there and buy that stuff from. Next, it's resource development. And in this case, it's talking about building the website that, people are going to interact with, either to download your payload or something else. You can go on the dark web and pick these up for pennies, and there's a whole group doing that. Again, at the bottom I've got kind of the risk and reward, which is from basically a kind of a law enforcement perspective. Most of this stuff is really low risk. You can do it, publish it on the dark web or a hacking forum, and no one will kind of really care. The economy in this is kind of really interesting. Then there's initial access. Things have been a bit more interesting now. This is where someone's actually opened the email, they've got their creds, and you can buy access to that infrastructure that perhaps been deployed by a group, and then use that to go onto your actions, which used to be deploying coin miners, and now is ransomware businesses. And as I said here, an entire chain here is often not developed by one group. If you're the Russians, you will have all of those stages covered in-house. If you are a much smaller ransomware affiliate, you might be picking and choosing those parts about which ones you're interested. So let's have a look at these a little bit further depth with some prices. So I went onto the dark web and I thought to myself, don't do this. You're not going to be bad guys, are you? I thought to myself, how much money do I need to get into this game? And the answer is not very much. For reconnaissance, getting people's email addresses, all of their details to provide a service that can really launch, those targeted emails straight into the heart of an organisation, you're spending between 30 and 100 quid to buy massive databases of all people's personal information. This is crazy, really. So resource development, it's even cheaper. You can pick up a website that you can deploy on a hosting service and collect people's credentials for as little as $1. You can get a managed service from 400 quid where they do it all for you. That means defeating all of the blue team's technology to stop that from getting into the eyeballs of the user. This is the greatest control panel, which is the new kind of scourge that's coming up. It's a whole beautiful managed service. You log in, you basically put your email addresses in there, and they'll provide the access for you. They are really good at this now. We've allowed them to be that way by not stifling them earlier. Next up, this kind of initial access. The phishing attack's been successful. We've got our beachhead. It might be betting accounts, that kind of thing. You can buy this. I just went on the dark web. You can get access to a large company in Europe, an Asian tourism ministry, textiles in Italy. You're talking about around £4,000 for that initial access. So if you've got £4,000 into your bank account, you're straight into Asian tourism, ready to start your ransomware campaign. And of course, then there's the actual actions. And this is a managed service you can get now, and they'll take 50% of the earnings. So you don't even have to stump up anything for yourself. The outlay for a phisher, is sadly minimal, and the return on investment is great. And so we need to do something to disrupt this, and hopefully cyber deception can help. So we have this big problem in our industry, which is the asymmetry in cyber. You may have heard that before, the fact that the defenders have to get lucky all the time, and the attackers only have to get lucky once. And deception is a way of changing that round, hopefully, so that, we can turn the tables on the attacker so they have to get lucky all the time. We need to do this to push back against an attacker, because if we don't do that, it's going to become more and more difficult in the future. Deception technology allows us to do this by actually attacking the thing in the system that doesn't change very often, is hard to change, and that's the phisher themselves. So we often use psychological tools and tricks to attack the thing that's behind the keyboard, because that's the bit that you can't change. That's the bit that's difficult to patch. So what I want to do is I want to increase their effort I want to make it more difficult to do their work, which is attack me. You know what it's like when you come into the office and you sit down to do your work and everything's broken, it's really hard to do your job and you hate your job and that kind of stuff. That's the life I want them to have. So my plan to do this, they're sending me emails, I'm going to reply, and I'm going to waste all of their time and resources. It's as simple as that. And as you'll see in a second, perhaps not that simple, but I want to waste their time, and in doing so, collect tons of threat intelligence about them. Stuff that, they find really difficult to change. Stuff that's integrated into their way of working. And I want to use that to push into the rest of the Microsoft system to really stifle how they do their business. So, first of all, I need some kind of process to turn this idea into something that we can actually deploy. And this is what's talking about how we actually prepare internally for a deception operation. So, these are kind of my steps here. So, down the side, what are the objectives? Well, I want to frustrate people. I want to increase their costs. If they're having to buy something, I want it to cost even more. I want to collect TI to enable defenders really, really easily. I talk about channels next. Like, how am I going to communicate with people? If you think about a ransomware negotiation, it's a chat box, and you're talking text to the other side. In this case, it's kind of the emails, it's the phishing sites, it's their infrastructure. That's the channel that I've got to communicate to these phishers. Next up, what reaction do I expect from these people? They're probably going to get annoyed. They're going to maybe change their behavior. They'll know that I'll be watching them. How am I going to monitor stuff? This is really, really important to a deception operation. How will I keep watch, make sure stuff's working, check the response rate, make sure that I can still access their sites. Maybe they've blocked my IP address kind of thing. Look on Twitter and other forums, that kind of stuff. What could go wrong? They could DOS me. They could, find some way of hurting Microsoft. Well, they're already doing that anyway, but we need to keep that kind of under consideration. How do we stop doing something bad? Let's say it's all gone wrong and they've turned their attention on Microsoft and they've got some big DOS cannon they're firing at us. Well, how can we back off? How can we calm the whole kind of stuff down? How can we stop this deception operation? What intel are we going to collect? This is now really crucial for defenders. I want tons of IP addresses. I want their fish kits. I want diagnostic logs. I want absolutely everything that I can get. And, how am I going to kind of display this? Dashboard threat hunting, great for the rest of the business. So, loads of people often tell me that doing deception operations against people never work. And I'm here to dispel that. I hear things like, they're going to see this a mile away, you won't catch any bad guys. It's just not going to work. The truth is that people make stupid decisions. Like, even the threat actors, they don't really care often. They're just doing a job. And they're working for a paycheck as well. And if they see they've been caught, they just go, oh well, and they don't think of the ramifications of that. They just ignore me. All of these things. But everyone's making a mistake. Here's Kim Kardashian. She's making a mistake. She's playing poker and she's got mirrored glasses on. This is a really great example, doing things you shouldn't do. Maybe you can't fool either. And there's this one as well, which is someone saying they've lost their NFTs and then they're being scammed literally like one second later. Everyone thinks they're on the lookout for this stuff, but they're often not. So anyway, what we're going to do, what's the scam? What's the plan? So I'm going to turn Azure into a honeypot. I'm going to create a new company, also known as a Microsoft tenant. I'm going to enable access to Azure and all the different things on there. I'm going to set up a custom domain name. I will do things like restrict access to services that I'm thinking are dangerous, that I don't want people to have access to. I might weaken services. A great one for weakening is turning off multi-factor authentication. I don't want the attacker to be burdened with that kind of stuff. I'm going to fill this org with juicy data, and I'm going to create thousands and thousands and thousands of user accounts. Then, I'm going to drive phishers to our infrastructure. Putting up honeypots and waiting for people to come back This is never going to happen. You need to put a lure out there, like you're fishing for something, or fishing for fishers. And so I then go to our Microsoft Defender for Office 365, great name, and that's our service that collects all our different phishing sites. It inspects people's emails, makes sure that they don't contain malware. And I look at all the real-time list of phishing sites we collect. I then spin up a browser in a Linux container, visit that site, and type in those real creds. I do the exact opposite that we're telling people to do. The exact opposite. And the phishers don't know what's happening. They're seeing thousands and thousands of different creds. And they don't know which ones are real and which ones are fake. Next up, they've got to test them. They've got a cred. Often they do a little bit of automated test in the back end, do a quick cheeky request and see if it's valid. They always are. So at that point, they have to log in to that infrastructure and determine if it's a real company or one of Ross's fake companies. And at that point, for them, the game is over. We have got every single log turned on. We know exactly the email that they've come from, and we can track it all the way back to all of the diagnostic logs that are coming from all of our services. So we've got really good optics now on what happens in the first 5 minutes of an attack, or 1 hour or 2 hours, that kind of stuff. And then we can take those logs and do amazing stuff with it. And here is the results of this. This is kind of what I've found. I'm sorry there are a lot of pie charts. So this is my kind of triangle model of all the data we get funneling down. So we're currently browsing to around 20 to 25,000 malicious phishing sites a day. Now, some of those have been taken down already. For some sites, the process is really, really slick. So 15,000 of those are still up by the time we've come and type creds into them. Now, for rightly or wrongly, there's some complexity about visiting every phishing site and trying to type creds into them. We can only type creds into about 5,000 of those. The phishers might have blocked some of our attempts. They might have set up, they're setting up captures and stuff like that, which we don't try and break yet. And from that, we can see about 200 different IP addresses logging in a day, which is about a 5% response rate, which, if you're into sales or anything like that, that's great. 5% is amazing. Sometimes it goes as high as about 7 or 8. It's because they can't really tell if an infrastructure is good or bad. We then see about 150 different user accounts triggered a day, so that's kind of new ones. So sometimes the phishers are coming back on old ones. We download about 20 phish kits, which is the actual sites that they put up there. We automatically grab those as well. The vast majority of those are already in VirusTotal. We're not alone in kind of finding phish kits and tagging them like that. We, on a day-by-day basis, track 2 to 3 known groups. Now, I work in Mystic, so that's Microsoft Threat Intelligence Center, where we do the tracking of all the state groups. Sometimes these aren't state groups. They are aligned with, financial crime actors, that kind of stuff. But, we've already seen that pattern of activity for, sometimes we can go up to kind of 6 as well. Groups like Secret Blizzard, aka Krypton, aka Turla, those are the groups that we often see, still doing this. These are big state actors. It's not people in their bedrooms. Less than 10% of the IP addresses that we see are in any kind of other known database. And that's because some of these actors are using single-use infrastructure. They're not just using, some 3G dongle out their window. What do we do with all this information? Well, we push a lot of it into Microsoft's Threat Intelligence Engine. And we do collect a lot of secret source from our diagnostic logs, which I'm not going to go through today, but things like IP addresses. If we see a single-use IP address, so that's an IP address that's not used by, a million different people, it's not, your Vodafone IP address, for instance, then we will do things like push that IP address to our edge to completely block access to it. So that phisher logs in with that user account, and suddenly Azure, Office, everything just 404 for them. What we also do is push information about the identities that the attacker is using into our identity protection part of Entra. And if you've ever seen this page before, which is your risk score, how we understand if users have logged in as risky or not is because we see the same infrastructure being used by those phishing groups. And so if you have our free offering, that will go absolutely nuts. If you are an E5 customer and you have XDR installed, then we can automatically take down, disable a compromised user as soon as that login has occurred. And this is not just based on IP addresses. I'm very careful not to say what we're actually using because I don't want to give this out, but we've got lots of different metrics about the infrastructure that phishers are using, and that's what we're building that signature and understanding on. So where are these attacks coming from? So we can look at IP addresses, but do understand that a lot of IP addresses are shared, and so put your skepticism hat on. But yeah, from this graph, most phishers are using kind of VPSs. You can think any VPS provider under the sun we're pretty much covered by. There are some places, though, that we know to probably trust those IP addresses, and it's kind of areas like that and that are more likely to be people sat in their rooms, often using an iPad or something to conduct their phishing. We've already got lots of Tor blocks in place, so we don't see a lot of Tor traffic from phishers. So we see some phishers using a completely different IP address every time they make a connection, but then once they made that successful connection to organization, they kind of retain the use of that. And we have done some work into try and understand what they're doing, and it looks like they have quite a sophisticated machine to basically give them single-use IP addresses and then hold on to them when they're actually needed. And this says to me that their infrastructure is incredibly robust. They know exactly what they're doing. And this is the kind of machine that we as defenders need to have an effect against. And how are they accessing a tenant? Now, this is really interesting. It's the browser. However we've cut this, we've really looked into the logs. It's the browser all the time. And that, as an engineer, is a really kind of a shock for me. I thought I'd be building my automation based on like our SDKs and our APIs, but that's not the case. They are often manually doing this. And, we can drill into this a bit further and have a look, see what they actually do with our APIs. And again, this is a little bit of a shock to me. The first thing they do is they go straight for the inbox. When we talk about the Graph API here, this is the API for getting information about an organization, the number of people in that organization, what their jobs are, that kind of stuff. And this is the first thing they do. And this is pretty much the same for all phishers regarding whether they're state actors or someone in Nigeria. And we can look at browsers. We can go a bit further. Everyone's using Chrome. This is a little bit sad because, Edge is, third place or something, so we need to do some kind of outreach there. But there's some other kind of weird and wacky browsers, the Maximum browser, Yandex browser, and a surprising amount of iOS. So it says to me there are, and we can link this back to groups, there is one group out there that just does their post-breach stuff on an iPad, on their lap in front of the TV, just manually doing it. These are the people we're talking about. There's there's some groups, they've got this really sophisticated machine, they've done some programming, they're giving out single-use IPs, and some people it's just iPad on the lap in front of the TV doing stuff. And these are the kind of things that we need to know to be able to, affect them. And if it isn't the browser, then broadly speaking, it's some kind of mail client. And I was like, what's this kind of cool thing, Chinese thing up here? And it's basically a mail client. Some other random stuff that's popped up is that you think like Bing pops up in our logs, and that's because what they do often is they onboard their entire machine onto our organization. They go into, AAD, join my work or school account, and then everything from their browser and stuff is giving us diagnostic logs. So that's how Bing's popped up, because if you onboard Edge and hit a new tab, often it's using your identity to get things from your organization to fill out that kind of summary page. Okay, I talked about monitoring earlier. It's really important that we monitor what these phishers are doing, monitor this system, monitor the tons of logs that we're getting after feeding them all these creds. And we found something quite interesting. We've been running this now for a couple of years. And it takes about 20 days for most, that's kind of 80 to 90% of phishers, to get wise that we're trying to trick them. This is a long time, 20 days. And you know, what do I mean by that? I mean, if you get an email from something at example.com, then it takes 20 days for them to go, hold on, I think example.com might be a trick domain. And I think that's a really long time. And at that point, they start seeing that domain and going, I don't think we'll log in anymore. They hit the Azure login page, or you know, your Entra login page, and then back away. So we need to do something about that. And we can zoom into this, and you know, it's interesting to see how we found this. So when they hit that login page and bounce away, you know, that's lost TI. They're not logging in and not creating that diagnostic logs. But I can still play a trick on them. I can still do something because I can customize that login page. And what we do is we change that login page and we put a web bug in the footer. And so when a phisher goes to that site and they see that company logo that they may have thought, actually, this is a trick site, I'm going to be tricked, they've already lost their IP address and information about their browser because I have started playing the tricks that they play on us. So if you maintain an organization, you can do that too. You can put your own web bug in there and track people that are hitting your login page but not actually logging in. And so what do we do about that? How do we fix that? Well, we know it's 20 days. So every 2 weeks, I create a brand new company. I'm Microsoft. I can go to our back end. I summon up a new tenant. I use, GPT to, create me a new company name, create me a logo, generate all of that and put it out there on the internet and send more creds to them and deluge them. We have built a system called Sea Haven, which I've open sourced, which helps the creation of this test data, this realistic company. And this is a system that you can say, create me a new company, create me 10 or 20 products for this company, create me 1,000 or 10,000 employees, and then start doing things like emailing from one employee to the next and create rich test data. So when they log in, they spend as much time as possible in our environment. And this generates a massive JSON file, which we load into our Exchange server, into our SharePoint site. So when the phishers log in, it's not just this empty, barren environment and they just kind of bounce out. We want them to stay in our playground, we want them to stay in our honeypot and waste as much time in there as they can. Because if they're wasting time in our environment, they're not wasting time in your environment. So things we didn't expect. We don't have credit cards on our subscriptions and our tenants. You can't waste money. We're not giving free compute to an attacker. And that forces them to get creative. So what they did, they start turning on the free trials. It's like, okay, so we had to fix that. They turned on Teams' VoIP features, which we believe was so they could use that as a basis to do further VoIP phishing. So we've turned that off now. They don't get anything free. And they also abused, this was a really nice attack. So when we leak creds to the phisher, we're giving them a real Microsoft account. And what they did is they used this Microsoft account to then go and get $150 of Azure free trial. And that bypassed our internal checks. So we now have a system that stops that. But what that allowed us to do was have direct access to all of the infrastructure they were setting up with that free subscription. So as Microsoft, I can say to you that if you use our API and you report to us that some subscription or person is using Azure for bad stuff, we can shut that down, but we can't go into that environment and start pulling the disk images and looking at that because, for us, Microsoft is committed to privacy. And so that kind of prevents the amount of extra work we can do with the data that is already on our platform. And, rightly so. But this was a subscription that I could control. I'm the administrator of this tenant, and this is 100% bad actor. So I can log in with the user account that I've got and start rummaging around through all of their resources and pull their disk images and doing forensic work on there and generating new TTPs. So that was really great for me. We used this to then build a system that could look for that pattern of life over every single customer on Azure, and we found 300 tenants that were similarly affected by the same actor. They weren't being compromised by free trials. Their real credit card was being used and billed, and so we were able to shut that down, which is really great. We saved a lot of people some money that day. I keep on talking about time wasted. Time wasted is so important. And we can get the diagnostic logs and work out how much time we've actually wasted. I've done this presentation a few times, and it's really great to see that every time I do it, the number goes up and up and up. So yeah, we look at the diagnostic logs. We rule out or rule in anything that's human activity, and we've got a really good understanding about what is human and what isn't human. We can remove really long sessions that look like what's that about, and concentrate on activity that really is based on a human at a keyboard. And when we do that, we started with 3 days of wasted time. We're now up to 30 days of wasted time. And this isn't working days. So working days, what I've put this is 90 working days. So this is 3 months of real people working that we've just wasted in our infrastructure. And this is a great way of imposing cost on an attacker and making their day really horrible. And so I'm really proud to see this keep on going up. Now, I've reached basically the end now. I want to leave you with some takeaways that knowing the attacker is key to stopping the attacker. If you don't understand how the attacker is operating, if you don't understand why they're doing something the way they're doing it, we don't have a hope in creating adequate defenses against them. Deception is one way of creating an environment that allows the attacker to tell us all this information. Phishers use their browser and they go straight to the inbox and they look for your emails. So that's where, if you're a defender, you should put your effort after the breach has occurred. Most compromises actually happen 2 to 3 hours after that cred has been lost. So if your anti-phishing training is really, really good, and your users know to report something immediately, you might be okay. And 2 to 3 hours is an average. Obviously, some stuff is seconds afterwards. But often these are, as I said, people in front of a TV with a laptop on their legs doing the kind of stuff. And it's a race against time between us and them, really. Microsoft's investing in loads of anti-phishing technology. We'll continue to do that. And if you're interested in seeing how we've used AI to build this test data that we fill out our Azure honeypot, you can find the details there. And that is it from me. Thank you very much.